Let's talk about, you sent me your coaching names that you like, so we can talk about those right now. And you sent me to them in three or four different categories, and kind of had a representative of each category. So if you just want to go kind of down the list and kind of explain each one.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I kind of identified these category types of coaches, and not always my favorite, but the ones that are most intriguing to me. We've got, Anthony Campanelli, the Jags defensive coordinator, who kind of represents the defensive coordinator, first time head coach. Obviously Jesse Minter just was hired by the Ravens. You mentioned he's that type, right? There's some other guys, right? Shula, there's some other defensive coordinators out there who are like that. This is the one I find intriguing. He's really done a good job turning around the Jaguars defense. They were 27th ranked scoring defense and brought them up to 8th. There's a viral video going around of him being just kind of very charismatic and fiery. That's really influenced a lot of people. So if you're going, this new defensive coordinator who's going to turn things around, that is a guy who I think is intriguing. Certainly, again, there's other names in that, but he's a guy who's on my radar. Then you've got someone who is like not a regular offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator, but is a player at another position. A coach at another position that, is that you're considering. Certainly in your division, you look at Mike Tomlin was not a defensive coordinator when they hired him, right? So you have those kinds of guys that are maybe a little different position than the offensive defensive coordinator. That's Thomas Brown. He's the Patriots passing game coordinator. And I'm intrigued by him because, they talk about him and Drake May and all he's done there. But if you look at his coaching resume, he's coached running backs and other positions. And I look at him, and what's intriguing to me is that he's sort of a guy who is not like the cliche quarterback whisperer or even cliche, offensive wunderkind who has this crazy, Mike McDaniel or whatever, but more like a guy who I wonder and think of as maybe a guy who builds a holistic offense. And if you're the Cardinals and your quarterback situation's uncertain and you don't want to be so focused on trying to develop a quarterback who's not even in your building yet, I'm intrigued by this guy because he can work on building an offensive system and building, on our receivers and our tight end and build a system that the next quarterback can step into. And so that just kind of more holistic approach is intriguing to me. Then we get to kind of the first-time head coach offensive coordinator, right? And Mike LaFleur, Rams offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak's another name in there, all kind of interesting, certainly, but you've got a guy here who comes from, the Shanahan tree, and has been under, that Rams offense is coached there. That's just really, really been impressive. He has some history working with rookies, developing like Garrett Williams and Puka Nacua. So this is that, kind of cliche offensive, young offensive mind that I would be intrigued by. And then finally we get to the retreads, right? And Vance Joseph I've got here is the intriguing name, not because he's my favorite. I think that a lot of Cardinals fans would hope we could land Sean McDermott. I don't know that he's going to be interested in the Cardinals job. I think he might hold out for something better. Vance Joseph was our defensive coordinator under Cliff Kingsbury. He's known in the building. The word is, the ownership likes him and knows him. And, he's not the most exciting name. And in fact, a lot of Cardinals fans, because we know him and, just like, having bad memories from the Cliff Kingsbury era. But certainly he's reestablished himself as a coaching candidate. And he's like the betting odds on favorites right now, I believe. And he's the name. If you said, okay, you have to pick one name that you think is the most likely guy to end up being the coach, this is probably the name because the familiarity with the ownership, he's willing to come here, unless he gets a job somewhere else, it seems like. They know him, they like him, and they may not have many better options because of what we talked about earlier with it not being the best job, right? So this may be like a lot of Cardinals fans will be very disappointed. I don't hate it as much as other fans do, but I'm not excited about it either. But this might be where we end up landing. So I would love to see us land one of these coordinators who just decides to take a shot with their first job, and we catch lightning in a bottle with a young, exciting coach like a LaFleur or Campanelli. But we might not be able to land one of those guys.
Yeah, and I don't think either one of those guys needs to leave either.
Yeah.
Like, they're not being pushed out. Campanelli is definitely not being pushed out of Jacksonville. Michael LaFleur may want to, kind of spread his wings a little bit since he's seeing what his brother's doing up in Green Bay. Maybe
might want to wait for a better job.
That's true. Yeah.
Which Ben Johnson did that, right? And it worked out.
I know Silverwolf, I don't know if he's still in here, but he said that he would personally move Sean McDermott to Arizona. So on one of our videos. So
yeah. Listen, the Cardinals fans would, and I think he'd be a really great stabilizing force. But listen, I think this Cardinals division is so tough, like we talked about. You could do everything right and still finish third place for the next 2 or 3 years. It's just so tough. So, like, my realistic expectations is I'd love to see us be a playoff contender, but let's see if we can just raise the floor and be consistent. Like, if we could raise the floor and be competitive and even if we don't make the playoffs for a couple more years, I know I would be disappointed, but like, realistically, it's going to be so tough to win this division or even get a wild card spot in this division. Let's get someone in here who builds us to respectability, if nothing else.
Now he's adding shovel his driveway. So,
that's all that shoveling you have to do in Arizona, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, he's so kind.
Yeah.
At his Buffalo home, walk his dog, personal shopper, etc. Man, Silverwolf is
get
adding
his dry
stuff.
Cleaning.
He's negotiating against himself, I think. So,
well, I appreciate what he's negotiating on behalf of us Cardinals fans. Like, take that for take that responsibility for us. So, it would be he could build the stability, but like I tweeted this out, I think a while back too. Like, the Cardinal, it's been a while since the Cardinals have been good on either side of the ball, like really good. If we can just get even if we get a guy who I'm not excited about, someone like Vance Joseph or whatever, and they can come in and build a really good defense, and we can just try to figure out what to do on offense to get enough points. That's it. I want better, but I'll take that if that's the best I can get, because it's just been terrible, like what we've had lately, right? Like, even last year or the year, when they had the 8 wins, they did that, but like they didn't have either side of the ball like a top 10 unit, right? Build us a top 10 defense, right? Build us an elite defense, draft, develop the guys we've got, build us an elite defense. We'll figure out enough on it. We've got some players on offense. We'll get enough on there, and let's at least be respectable, and then see if we can get the quarterback in there and take that next step from there. But we haven't even been that yet.
Yeah. So of these guys that you've kind of listed, who is your favorite? You talked about Vance Joseph a lot, but you said you're not super high on it.
Yeah, maybe LaFleur, because bringing in that offensive mind, like there's been a lot of success in the league with bringing in that kind of guy. And, certainly in Seattle, you see what they've done. You've seen it with the Vikings, right? Listen, even Mike McDonald, or McDaniel, who was fired from the Dolphins, like, he still built a really good offense. And if they had a quarterback who wasn't always getting injured, and he might still have that job there. So even though he got fired, like, those guys come in, those offensive guys, and they have success, right? So that's probably would be my first choice of those guys. If you could get a guy who's more established like McDermott, I'd take that. But probably the offensive kind of, Robert Saleh was actually a guy I really wanted before he got hired. But LaFleur, I would probably say of that list, is probably my first choice.
And he's in your division, so he's familiar with these defenses already. He's played against, Robert Saleh has obviously moved on, but he's played against that 49ers defense. He's played against Mike McDonald's defenses. So he's got some familiarity game planning for them. So that could be an advantage as well.
For sure.
I think Thomas Brown is interesting as well because
he's high on my list too. Yeah.
He was the guy who, when Eberflus got fired, he took over as the interim head coach in Chicago.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have a ton of experience, but he was entrusted with that for at least a few games. I don't know how much credit you want to give him for that, but it's something. I think it shouldn't go overlooked.
Yeah, for sure. So he's got some experience being that guy, right? And if it's almost for me, almost more like 1A, 1B with him and LaFleur. LaFleur is more the kind of the conventional offensive coordinator guy, but I am so intrigued that if you tell me we got Thomas, I'd be happy. Thomas Brown. So
is it Mike, Thomas, and then Vance, I assume?
Actually probably more Campanelli.
Campanelli's in there before Vance.
Yeah, I don't dislike Vance Joseph as a coach as much as some fans do, but I'm not excited about it. It's more one of those things where I'm like, if we can't land a guy that I'm excited about, and we end up with Vance Joseph, who I think it's going to be, I think he's going to be better than fans think he will be, but I'm not excited about it.